Absolutely. So we got the AEW ratings report this afternoon, right after the release news started coming. AEW did way better than
I'm just
we
trying
could
to
have
buy
imagined.
shoes and get a haircut, man, and all this news is happening.
It's like one of the most newsworthy days in a while, I guess, outside of WrestleMania, of course, but all this stuff breaking from both companies. So AEW, we had this not really prediction, but we had a discussion in our Facebook forum yesterday on where do we think AEW is going to come in with the ratings? You know, how good should they be expecting? What do they need to do? And we were like, 900,000 would be a really good number for them. Well, turns out they beat that by like over 30%. AEW Dynamite, 1.219 million viewers on Wednesday night. Of course, this is their first night now going unopposed by NXT. Moving forward, this is the second highest viewership they have ever done with not like any more promotion than usual. You know, just the fact that NXT wasn't going head to head. The only show that they've ever done with a higher viewership number was the premiere back in early October of 2009 that did a 1.4 million. And then in the key 18 to 49 ratings demographic, AEW did a 0.44 demo rating, which is a very good rating. It was number 2 for the night on cable. It beat 2 NBA games that were on ESPN. Can't remember what the show was that beat them, but I mean, overall, number 2 on cable. Excellent 18 to 49 rating. And then, of course, the viewership blew out of the water our expectations. And so when you look at that number and you break it down, where they made big gains was in the over 50 crowd. The over 50 crowd is who always tunes into NXT. If you look at the AEW versus NXT ratings over the last several months, AEW would win every demo most weeks except over 50. That was the crowd watching NXT. So they clearly got a lot of those people to tune in out of curiosity this week. I believe last week AEW did a 0.24 in the 50 plus demo, and they did like a 0.5 this week, more than doubled what they did last week. So next week, to see how many people continue to tune in to AEW Dynamite will be key. But I mean, Kyle, a shocking number. So what do we attribute this to? Just the fact that NXT wasn't head to head?
All right, we'll get into that in a second. To answer your question, I just wanted to make sure the show is still on this week, and it is. That challenge on MTV was number 1, as it often is on Wednesday nights. I don't watch that show. You couldn't pay me to watch it, but apparently it's very popular with some people, so I don't want to sound uncool. What do I attribute this to? I don't know, because like you, I was stunned. AEW is coming off what I thought was their weakest episode of Dynamite in a long time last week. This show was coming at the tail end of a lot of wrestling. I mean, we had SmackDown Friday night, and that was preceded by 2 nights of TakeOver, and a night of AEW. The Hall of Fame, then we had 2 nights of WrestleMania, we had Raw, we had NXT first 2. So, I mean, there's been a lot of wrestling. And I made the comment in the Facebook thread. I said, is there a tipping point here where some people just could say, hey, I got to take a night off, particularly those WWE NXT loyalists, right? If they're like, hey, man, I've watched a lot of wrestling. Maybe I'll check out this AEW now that's on by itself. But not this week. I'm done. Well, apparently the answer is no.
Yeah, that's what we were worried about, burnout.
Yeah, because it shot up. And like you mentioned, it's mostly over 50 where the gains are. So, yeah, I mean, you just got to think that a lot of those people did. Jericho podcast effect, being on the Stone Cold sessions. Did that do anything? I mean, were there
Vince is grumbling now. Why did I allow that to
happen? Yeah. I mean, were there people who saw that and said, what's AEW?
Yeah.
I'm going to check this out. I don't know. I don't think that's a substantial number, but even if it's a few, Vince is probably kicking himself in that regard. I do know that virtually every show in the last 5 days or whatever has been up. SmackDown was up. And by the way, I don't ever want to hear again that hype shows can't do well in the ratings. Because that was a hype show last Friday. Granted, what they were hyping was the biggest show of the year, but still it shows, and it did well. I mean, it shows if you hype something that is good, people will be interested. It was old school. There were, pre-tapes, interviews. So I don't want to hear that format can't do well. Raw was up this week, over 2 million. Its best number since Mania, or since Raw After Mania last year, I believe.
Yeah, but it's been a while. They've been in that like 1.5 to just under 2 million ranking for quite a while. In fact, I was going to mention there was a Raw in December that Dynamite beat in the target demo this week.
Yes.
So I mean that's how big this AEW Dynamite number was. Raw did a 0.41 in 18 to 49 back in mid-December. So.
Yeah, and the overall number is, like I said, about 500,000 off from what they were doing a few weeks ago. And people could say, "Oh, well, Dynamite was good last night. Maybe that's something to do with it." Well, Raw was up, and Raw was the opposite of good on Monday night. So I don't know if it's just that everyone was really into watching wrestling this week. I don't know if there's something specific. I'll have to look at those breakdowns. I mean, they had Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
I mean, was that something? But it's not like they had some heavily hyped match.
Yeah, it's like, so Tyson's been on the show now before a couple of times. He's still a major name, though. And
you could argue he was actually hyped up a little bit more last week when the ratings. So I don't know if you could attribute very much to Mike Tyson when we're doing things. Was it that first match? Was it the Bucks match that just held people and people liked what they saw and they stayed?
I mean, dude, talk about an awesome match to open with. Yeah, you look at this in retrospect, and it's like, we didn't think the number was going to be anywhere close to this big. It was. Then they had their best show in weeks. They open with that awesome tag team match. So, like, if they're going to draw any of these people back, on a consistent basis, they did about as good a job as they could at putting on a pretty darn good show. If they would have tuned into a show a couple of weeks ago and we were kind of critical of the focus of the show and everything, maybe not so much, but as far as how they did last night, like, I think they hit it out of the park. It's the best show they've had in a long time.
And you mentioned this a couple minutes ago. It's all about retention, right?
Yep.
I mean, doing one big number is nice. I mean, but you have to be careful about doing cartwheels over it. Remember when SmackDown debuted on Fox and they did like 4 million, and 3 weeks later they were right back down to what they were doing on USA every week? So it's all about getting people to stay. I mean, one number is nice. This number is obviously, their second best ever, but you would hope to see, a strong retention rate moving forward. Can they consistently stay over 1 million? I think that can they expand on this number? That's the ultimate goal. I mean, 1.2 is great. But you want to beat the number, right? You want to continue to do record ratings. That's what we would see in the Monday Night Wars. It was all about setting records every week, right? So, can they inch closer to Raw? I think that's a big storyline to do because I would be shocked if Raw had a strong retention rate next week. I think that 2 million number was based on that myth of, it's the night after WrestleMania. We know how Raw can get so crazy. That hasn't happened in a while.
Yeah. Damien in the chat, he says, I mean, it's a better overall product, but obviously not having another show on Wednesday helps a lot. But NXT only went up 150 to 200,000 viewers, while AEW went 600,000 up after TakeOver week. So, I mean, just a massive gain, way more than I would have expected. I didn't think they were going to do 1 million, to be honest with you. Gabe Benson, Patreon supporter of the show in our Facebook group, he did. He said 1 million yesterday. So props to Gabe.
A tip of the cap. That's a great point by Damien. You can't just say, well, it's there by themselves, because NXT only went up, so far, whereas Dynamite went up way more. So obviously they did something that attracted more people with the split night. So, very interesting. It really drives home the point that NXT going to Wednesday was always about limiting the AEW number. I talked about this before. We all did on the show. WWE, obviously they wanted to win the Wednesday night ratings consistently. They certainly didn't want to lose, but it was more about keeping the AEW number down. They don't want the AEW number to get within range of Raw, where somebody can, like some media entity picks that up and writes an article. Hey, did you know there's this other wrestling company and they're basically doing the same numbers Raw? That's the WWE's nightmare. That's what they do not want.
Yeah.
So, it'll be interesting to see how close, if they can get any closer moving forward. But again, it's all about putting on good shows. And, if you put on a good show, I think people will follow you, and we shall see.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, regardless of what was said on NXT conference calls, and we were always on Wednesday nights and stuff, it's like NXT was a show that people watch on demand. It wasn't appointment viewing to watch it live. It's true they're on Wednesdays, but because of the TNT schedule, Dynamite pretty much had to be on Wednesdays, and NXT consciously put their show there on USA to siphon off viewers, and we're seeing why with this rating here potentially. So we'll stay tuned in the weeks ahead. We'll be talking on the podcast a lot each and every week and following this, because yeah, like you said, the comparison to Raw and even topping some recent Raw numbers, if AEW can keep this number up, I mean, we're talking a whole new ball game here. And keep in mind too, AEW growing their audience here potentially during a pandemic. When you look at the history of AEW Dynamite starting in October of 2019, they only had a handful of months where they were touring, and they've been putting on these shows over and over at Daly's Place in Jacksonville with a limited audience or no audience. That's a huge detriment to the product potentially, but they've gotten very good, I think, at presenting those shows. But it's still not the same as going to a different arena every week and having those engaged fans surrounding ringside. So for them to be pulling a number like this a year and a half into the company's history on TNT is just massive. You got to tip your hat to them.